one of the things I'm sure that a lot of you know about already is like how the society treats people with disabilities and how the attitudes around us. Well, I've discovered over the years that I don't really need to sit down and tell you or anybody else about weakness. I want to talk to you about strength. And I want to talk to you about what people can really do when they're motivated and when they're clear about who they are. I think I got polio when I was 14 in 1953. That's a while ago. But it was before the vaccine. So, I don't know how many of you can remember those days, but polio was a scourge. You know, it was a terrifier. People were just terrified that their children might get it, or their families or somebody might get it. It was a virus spread like a flu or cold. Not too many people got it around me, but one of my friends died, and then I got it. And when I got it, everybody got it. The whole family got polio. But their polio was non-paralytic. All they had was basically they were quarantined. People were so afraid of polio those days. When somebody would get polio in your household, they would put these big red signs on the front of your house and warn everybody away, and people had to stay in. You know, when I got polio, the whole school emptied. It was such a negative attitude about what might happen. And I was first I was a March of Dimes poster child, but then they discovered that I was too disabled, right? And see, March of Dimes was a classic charity, in that they knew how to make people feel terrifically guilty if they knew how to pull all kinds of money out of people. But in the process of doing that, they created a lot of fear and a lot of problems for all of us, as most charities have, because they have this dual role. They're supposed to be helping you or a family, but at the same time, they've got to get money. So they portray you as weak and sick and unable, and actually have probably created a lot of the old attitudinal problems that we fight day to day now. So when I talk about the fact that we have a group of people who are operating in charity, and all the negative things that people who have some civil rights. As weak as they are, and as intact as they are, they still are basic rights. And we do have a right now, if we are discriminated against, to fight that. And discrimination comes in a lot of forms. So when I came before this, and I talk about my experiences. I talk a lot about the fact that I've become a very strong person over these years. Not only from life in general, but because I had a disability. Of course, it forced me to do things and learn things that many young people never have to. I haven't come to terms with death. I'm not afraid of that. I had to when I was 14 and 15. First thing I had to decide when I wanted to live or die, which is a very difficult decision. I wanted to die. So when you're 14 and you're paralyzed from the neck down and you're in and out of love, you have to be terrifically creative to commit suicide. I mean, there are all these people around you, doctors and nurses and everybody that are, their job is to save your life, and yet they're either totally depressed and not knowing what the hell your life's going to be all about. And I had totally accepted the whole idea that being crippled was terrible. We don't really understand how we inculcate all these attitudes in people. But in fact, that before I even became disabled, I saw it as really being a terrible thing. Tragedy and how awful it would be to be disabled. I can remember sitting on my father's shoulder, and I was at a state fair or something, and I saw this young woman in a wheelchair who obviously had cerebral palsy. She moving about, but she was just moving around looking at things. And I was fascinated by this person. I'd never seen anybody like that. And I was really looking, and all of a sudden my father reached up to me, grabbed me, get me back, and said, "Don't stare." Without any explanation. But, well, oh my God, we can't even look at it. What does that mean? Something real needs to be afraid of it. And terrible. And you know, in so many ways we perpetuate with our young people these stereotypes. Often not explaining what we might not be polite there. But she was fascinating. She was different, you know. And I celebrate difference. I think difference is wonderful. And it would be pretty awful if we were all the same. And I've learned about my difference. But when people stare at me, when they look at me, and they see me as so different that maybe in a way they come out and have a lot of pity and feel sorry for me. I have a couple of reactions. One is that I can probably get anything I want out of them, because I can manipulate the hell out of them. Well, they see me as weak and unable, well, I'm not. And I come on strong and capable as well. While they are staring at my wheelchair, my respirator, and just feeling terribly sorry for me, I can use that. It's a very powerful tool, and it's something we should teach people to use practically. The other feeling I have is that it's totally their problem, and I'm not gonna internalize that and feel bad about who I am because they come along like that. I don't particularly like it, but I also do, and I learned this interestingly enough from the women's movement. I learned how to manipulate your stereotypes. Right? I was in a couple of self-support groups with women early in Brooklyn. I was watching these women teaching each other how to manipulate using the stereotypes of weakness in women. And I said, wow. And femininity and all things, and I was thinking, boy, that would work real well for disability. And I began to use it practically. Now, you see a lot of people that do that as part of their whole life. And it's a different thing, I think. But that's all they know how to do. And they can provide a weakness to use that manipulate. I don't understand most of your parents. And you may see that a lot, your own children, as they manipulate you to try to get something. And you need to be aware of that. And there it is. They may not be very aware of how they're doing it, but it's a very natural tendency to use that and play on your feelings. You may have some guilt feelings. You may have a lot of other kind of feelings. But hopefully you can recognize when it happens and encourage it when it needs to be used, but also be clear with them that that's happening. And that they can come from that angle, but they can come from other parts of you too. And especially, my mother was probably the most important person in my life, because she would believe in me. She was told, she went to the doctor after I'd been ill for about 2 days. And polio is voracious fever. You're running 106 fever. So you're really going through a lot of dreams and a lot of hallucinations. So you're terribly sick. They don't know whether you'll live or die. Antibiotics didn't really work to stop the fever. She went up to the doctor and said, "That's when I live or die." And the doctor said, "Well, maybe you should hope he dies. Because if he lives, he'll be nothing more than a vegetable for the rest of his life." Now, I don't know how many of you had that happen to you, but I'm proud to tell you there is an and I use that real a lot because I think, first of all, that's such a dead serious thing. He's saying to a doctor, "Is my child going to live or die?" And the doctor says it's better that he should die than live as a cripple and there'll be nothing more than a vegetable. What do you guys know? I'm not sure why medical people and others around like to predict the most dire circumstances about who you are. And almost everything that I was told was bullshit. And you need to be clear about that. Somehow people relish or something in telling you the words. You know, your child or the person that you trust will never be able to do this, will never have a family, will never. When I brought up the issue of sexuality, oh my God. I mean, what I recognize now is that they must have been real screwed up themselves about their own sexuality. Because obviously they couldn't talk about it to me. And I think that's true. You know, that's the only explanation I have. And as I got in, I wanted to know. I wanted to know if I have a normal sex life or if I have children. All those questions, and every answer was negative. Every time I asked, or even when I didn't ask, about what my future would be like, there was a negative reply. Maybe some people that are choosing to go into those professions are so wound up in trying to help, and in a sense take over for you. And in a sense they're trying to prepare you for the world. I don't understand it. I don't understand the psychology of it. But it's pretty awful when you're a parent or a person with a disability to get to hear that only the most negative aspects. Not that a doctor will say to you, but, you know, this person that you're helping to raise, well, then it's got a lot of what happens in terms of whether things are positive or negative, depending on whether you are positive or negative, and whether you can help the person learn to advocate for themselves. But first, you gotta do it. When I went to graduate from high school, I was high school by radio telephone. I didn't want to go out because I was terrified that people would stare at me. I didn't like myself very much. As I said, I accepted all of those stereotypes that I had. And I did very well in school. I didn't have a lot of distractions either. I didn't have all those teenage social rating and dating and all that stuff. And so I could concentrate on my studies. And I was studying. I mean, I didn't know I had a brain hardly when I was in grammar school. I hated school. It was really bad. For me, it was torture. I liked the way I played sports. I was a young athlete, and I was an inspired athlete. I was a good athlete. I was a professional baseball player. Well, polio changed that real fast. It made me begin to think of another profession at least. And I began to discover that I had a brain, and that not only did I have a brain, but that I was smart. And that when I applied myself, that I was one of the top students in the high school. And so, what a change from being viewed as a kid who was a kind of average, ordinary kid, not the brightest, to one of the top students in the class. And I began to realize the advantages of being considered smart. And you know, the way people label you in schools and the way you label yourself is so much similar to the way you're labeled when you become disabled. Whether you're labeled severely disabled or whatever your label is, CP or MS or there's so many labels again. Almost all of them are negative. And then we move another labels into, somebody called me on invalid the other day. Invalid? I love that word. It's just one of my real favorites. And for a while I was a shut-in. I have some deaf and dumb friends. And I mean, you think of the words that are used, cripple, the word cripple. All the words that are used to describe us in any way are the worst. I mean, they epitomize how we are viewed by society, how we are not valued in any sense of the word. We need all of us together need to be sure that we are using valued language. When I talk, I have a person with a disability. First, and then I have a disability. And when I talk about people have needs, and that's not our whole life. My disability does not define my whole life. It shouldn't. I have just normal needs like anyone else, and wishes and desires. And to move people apart, segregate them, put them in separate schools, and treat them so separately. There's a real problem, I feel it. It perpetuates dependence on a lot of things. To me, there's just what we have to do together is be very political. I mean, that's what you're here for, obviously. I mean, you're so lucky. This is a remarkable thing that's happening here. I don't know too many states that will do this. You have some leaders that have the imagination and the ability to create people like you've heard today, myself and others here to talk to you about it, to give you some of our experience and maybe to teach you that some of what you've heard and some of the expectations you've heard for your children and yourself are not true and don't have to be true. And that few people can make a big difference in a state or in a country and make fundamental change. And we need to change this place. I mean, I began to discover how little, well, everybody else is concentrating on disability, how sometimes disability was irrelevant almost. It didn't matter. It's funny, I went to the University of California at Berkeley. I was a bitch to get in. I mean, it was basic. Well, we tried couples and they failed. I love it. And then when I got in, there was a headline in the local newspaper, a helpless cripple attempts to Cal. Great, I still have that. I saved those. You know, you can. They're priceless. You've got to be able to laugh. You really got to be able to laugh at these things because they come from tremendous ignorance. And you don't see it quite as much anymore, but people still do make those kind of thought thoughts. After I was at Berkeley here, I fell in love with people. We do that once in a while, and it was wonderful. What a great feeling. It became, I was told that I could never drive a power wheelchair. That I was just too disabled to drive a power wheelchair. And it's ridiculously inconvenient to think an attendant with you pushing you around in a wheelchair everywhere. Right? It's real difficult to be intimate and to be alone in this thing. And I learned how to drive a power chair in 2 days. 2 days, this lady was on my lap and we were heading off to the sunset, I tell you. And that's motivation, you know? And if you're highly motivated to do something, I got support of a rehab engineer, and we figured this thing out so fast. And yet, for 15 years, I was pushed around in a chair. It changed my life again. I mean, it was like leaving home for the first time, going to the university and going, hiring my own lieutenant, then firing one for the first time. And learning that I could control my own life. And that was, talk about being reborn and revitalized. Well, the power chair was almost exactly the same kind of thing. For those of you that have children or people that are not mobile, find a way to make them mobile because it fundamentally changes your personality. How much? Little babies, children a year old or 2 years, who have never been mobile because they're paralyzed for what reason. And all of a sudden they get an electric scooter or something. And within 10 minutes, their personality has changed from being totally passive to being so aggressive, you wonder where they're going to go next. I mean, how they're going to challenge. We took a young student at Berkeley who came in and all he'd done for 15 years was sit in his room. And this guy was genius. He was a bright electronic guy who had done all this assembly work and built all these systems. And we brought him to Berkeley. When he would talk, he had to get real close because he was so, he just wasn't used to talking to people at all. And we gave him a power chair the first day he got there. And we lost him. We couldn't find him. He was finally, the campus police brought him back. And they fished him out of the creek. Because what he was doing, he was going to and Berkeley has a lot of hills. And he was on the top of the highest hills, and he was putting his wheelchair on full speed, and he just went fast as he could. He couldn't stop, and he ran in the creek. And he was, that day, he came in and I heard him talk. And he was so totally exhilarated by the ability to be able to move and to do things. And I think that's where rehabilitation engineering and the use of new technology comes in. I'm just learning how to use a computer, for example. Wow, what a big change that's going to be in my life, right? I've always dictated. I went through reading thousands of books at the university because I worked through a PhD in political science, correspondence, and read thousands of books with a mouse stick. And well, if I had a computer, I could have written so much faster, and so much easier with word processing than I had at that time. And it's hard for me to write, but with a computer, I think I'm going to be able to. Finally, I talk a lot, but I'm going to be able to finally write it down. It's like I'm better because everybody else is writing what I've been talking about. With my mother, we had to learn to fight together because there were so many people around with their little narrow rule books and who were always willing to say no. I mean, it was so amazing to me. I know those of you that were at the table, you must run into that a lot. You know, you go to school or you want your son or daughter to go to regular school or have this term or whatever, and people find a way of saying no. And sometimes when they're in a large bureaucracy, it seems like it's so cold and it seems so difficult to be able to fight them. And one of my first struggles was I went to graduate from high school, and I was immediately told that I couldn't graduate because I didn't have driver training in PE. And of course, well, you know, it's like a single lease that pisses me off. I was the number 2 student in school, and I'd done all the academic requirements. My mother, she said something like, "Well, goddamn it, we'll prop up behind the wheel, and I'll run the wheel." You know, he got very sarcastic at this guy, and then this guy said, well, he looked right at me and had basically patronized me. He said, "You wouldn't want to cheat the diploma, would you?" That's really cold stuff, and it's and aside from being almost humiliated, working so hard and feeling that I earned it, and at the same time feeling like I wanted to kill a guy, you know, both my mom and I. And so what we did was, at that time, first we threw the guy out of the house. He had to come to me, which was a very interesting phenomenon. More of us could do that. And secondly, we began to say, hey, how can we make this? How can we change this decision? And we went to the school board, and it was no problem. School board. All we had to do was say, hey, look, this is injustice. And in every way, I earned my degree. And what are you going to do about it? I got the first diploma of all students. But it was a very important thing for me and my mother to fight together. It was like a landmark for me, first of all. In fact, I don't think I could have done that alone at all. And both of us were terrified. I mean, boy, were we afraid. Not that we'd lose, but it's scary going up against authority. It is. It takes a lot to be able to do that. And there was no question once they heard that they was given my diploma. Well, you know, what that did for me, along with other small fights that we had, that we both learned how to fight together, was it gave me the confidence to fight for myself. And I think that's why I'm here right now, in a lot of ways, because I learned how to fight. I learned that if I was going to be free, if I was going to be independent, if I was going to lead my own life, then I had to fight for it. And the other thing I learned is that when you start fighting, it encourages a lot of others to do it too. It's like role modeling. And when we set up the Center for Independent Living, the first really center that brought together a lot of people with severe disabilities not to live together, but to fight and advocate together. We found how powerful period. Peer relationships, peer counseling. Yeah. I went to the person, okay, one more thing. I was so terrified when I was young. I stayed in 5 years. And nobody should really say that this is going to happen overnight. It's a process everyone goes through from often feeling basically weak and unable and not very powerful to basically learning how to love yourself again. When you begin to learn how to love yourself, you find out that others love you as well. And you begin to get into intimate relationships and friendships and all kinds of things. I stayed in 5 years. I was terrified. If I went out, people would stare at me. And so my mother and a couple others said, and I did, if you don't go out, you're going to be here your whole life. And my biggest fear was what would happen when my parents died. And of course their biggest fear was, will we be taking care of us? Our son, our whole life. And so with a swift kick to the butt, I believe in those, by the way. I think sometimes we're too gentle. We don't teach people to take risks. People have to learn how to take risks. When they're young or old, and that's the only way that we learn together. Is learning how to take that next step, that next risk. I decided I'd physically attend the high school one day. And they got me in this car, drove into this courtyard where about 200 students were. I went, oh no. You know, that feeling again. And they started getting me out. Everyone started to stare at me. I mean, here was my worst fear was I was sitting in the middle of it, and all of a sudden something happened to me. I looked around, and I wasn't hurting. It didn't hurt. And I said, "Oh, it's kind of like being a star." Oh, hey, that's not so bad, you know. And then I also said, not only does it not hurt, and maybe it's not so bad to be stared at. And then I said to myself, you know, I have a choice here. I can decide that it's because I'm ugly and because of all the bad feelings I have about myself. Or I can decide I'm a star, I'm just different. And that was very important to me because I began to make choices about how I accepted it. And I realized, hey, I'm going to separate here what's my problem and what's somebody else's problem. The fact that they're all staring at me doesn't have to be my problem. It could be theirs. And it's the same, I think those things were very important to me. And I try to teach those, that you make choices of how you feel. Whether people stare at you or not. And that can be tough. You know, I think there's a lot of lessons I've learned being a person with a disability. I've been disabled now 34 years. And I think it's been essentially a positive experience and a strengthening experience. And I think it can be for most people. And a lot depends on your attitude. You have a positive attitude, whether you're a parent or a disabled person. And that you move through life making your own choices. You take risks. You learn to take risks. And you're encouraged to take risks in your life. So you come up against new situations. You talk with one or something. Because I had to learn to say, well, I love you. Because I was afraid that when I said it, I'd get hurt so bad. I still don't feel that. But when I did, there was very great. As they often are. And life's great. And life, I have a little bit different perspective. You know, I relate to children real well because I'm at their level. It's interesting. It really is. I mean, one of the things you see is most children are very direct and honest. You know, they learn what happened, why. But you can tell them that that's fine. And I think my 9-year-old, who's 9 now, is one he probably taught me as much as anybody has taught me because when you're daddy or mama, it doesn't matter at all whether you're in a wheelchair or what you are. I wish more people could come to that perspective. Whatever it is about you that makes you different is pretty irrelevant. It's who you are as a person. It's the most important thing of all.